Welcome back to Vetted VA Live. It's actually the first Vetted VA Live here of 2023. A good time of year for us to jump back in, get the experts in here, both on the real estate and the mortgage side, and answering questions and get everyone who has the New Year's resolution to buy or sell real estate or get a new mortgage this year off on the right track. And tonight, we're going to talk about a really important topic. If you're looking at buying or selling or getting a loan this year, how do you find a pro that's going to have your best interests at heart and the knowledge, expertise, and experience to get you a good deal and shepherd you through that process? So with that, let me introduce our team of experts tonight. I've got Jason Rivera up here on the top row with me. He is a realtor with Legacy Realty Network here in Southern California in San Diego. Michael Dendy actually operates on both sides of the ledger. He is a realtor with Zach Taylor Real Estate in Franklin, Tennessee, and also does home loans with Edge Home Finance. And then finally, we have an Islander here with us. Stephanie Saffholm is a loan officer with High Velocity Mortgage in Oahu, Hawaii. So we've got almost all the way to the East Coast, all the way to the west of the islands. We got multiple time zones, multiple expertise levels here, expertise areas here. So with that, guys, why don't we jump into the conversation and say, if someone is thinking about doing something with mortgage or real estate this year, what are the things that are important for them to look at in a lender and or a realtor? Jason, if someone asks you that question, where do you kick it off in telling them the important things for them to look at?
When someone asks me, in Vetted VA or even in person, what should I do when I'm looking for a lender? I typically say, have a conversation. That's the very first thing. Call them up. Did they answer the phone? Did they respond? Did they schedule something? How quickly did they reach back out to you? Followed up with that conversation that you're having with them. What is your gut instinct telling you? Are you building a rapport? Do they sound like someone that you're going to be able to discuss your financial history with? I mean, that's huge, right? Like, I've seen people not want to discuss their finances with their lender, like they're trying to hide it. And I'm like, no, you need to be very open. You need to be very open with both sides, both your realtor and your lender. And then kind of going from that point, there's always a discussion of where interest rates are at for them. There's a discussion of, at least there should be also what the cost is to originate that loan. What fees should that borrower be expecting? And then following that up with, kind of lost my train of thought there. I'll pass the mic, but that's
so
kind of where I'm going at.
And Michael, you have an interesting perspective here because I'm sure as a lender, you work with other realtors. As a realtor, you actually represent buyers and sellers. What either side of the equation, either for a lender or a realtor, if someone is out looking for a professional, what is your advice in finding someone who's going to represent their interests well?
Well, I think specifically for the VA loan, it's super important to make sure that they understand what the VA loan is and what the VA loan offers. They understand the appraisal process with the VA loan. I mean, there's so many times I work on the loan side, I work with a realtor that doesn't have a clue anything about the VA loan process. And I'm basically pulling them through the process. And that makes it for a super difficult transaction when they don't know how to structure. They don't even, they're asking me how to structure things on their contract because they're not familiar with the VA loan. So I think it's super important to have somebody that definitely understands the VA loan and has dealt with it in the past. One of the questions could be, have you done VA loans in the past? Or have you, from a realtor side, have you worked with veterans in the past as a realtor? That's super important. I would think that's probably at the top. And then the second thing that, maybe it's just a pet peeve of mine. If somebody is constantly looking at their watch and they're constantly answering an email on their phone and they're in the middle of a conversation with you, I don't know that that's somebody you'd want to work with because either they're too busy and they don't have time to stop and give you the attention you need, or maybe they're just too scattered and they can't focus. And that's a big telltale sign, just the subconscious, I guess, movements that people make. That's super important.
And I think that goes back, to what Jason was saying. People, when you're making these calls, you could find the technically best loan officer or best realtor in the world. And if you don't build a rapport with them where you're comfortable talking to them and you feel like they're hearing you, it's going to be a two-way street. They're not just saying the right things, but they're actually hearing you. So I think that kind of gets discounted when people are shopping for their professionals. They think it's more about price or availability, 24 hours a day. And they don't focus quite as much as they should just on building a rapport. It's really important that you have a comfort level with that person. You believe that they're listening and understanding and hearing you, but also that you have that comfort level in terms of talking with them. Stephanie, you have any thoughts in terms of how you advise your lender clients when they're looking at selecting a realtor, or even what you would talk to them about when looking at lenders?
Well, I think for both, this is likely one of the largest purchases of someone's life. It's also something that's going to help their family build generational wealth. And if you looked at it, like, for example, if you were having kidney surgery, okay, chances are you're going to get a second opinion, right? You're not just going to be like, oh yeah, Dr. So-and-so, you do my kidney surgery. I'll be happy with you. I won't ask any questions. But for some reason on this side, when someone chooses a realtor or they've been referred someone, they just accept that person without asking the questions they need to ask. So that's the first thing, is like, think of it like that. Like, this is a huge step in your life. You want to choose someone that actually wants the best for you. And sometimes for us, sometimes it means that they might not work with me. I want what's best for them. Are you getting that feeling when you're talking to someone initially that they want what's best for you, that they want to find out who you are, and they're not necessarily talking to you about how they're number one, this or that, you know what I mean? And then the second thing is, even if you're referred someone from another, a real estate agent or a friend, find out before you start giving them your social security number and this and that, there should not be a rush to like, hurry up, fill out my application, give me your social security number. You should have the time to get an email from them, look them up online, make sure they're, a person, maybe look at some of their reviews. So that's kind of like where I go. I want to really teach people, whether they're looking for a real estate agent or a lender, to really ask the important questions that makes them feel comfortable with working with this person and that they're a real person.
So we kind of hinted at it, of some things that are red flags or things to look out for. Someone's looking at their watch, they're not hearing you, asking you to repeat yourself. But why don't we talk a little bit, and Stephanie, start with it on the loan side. Mm-hmm. What should that first conversation look like? If someone finds you on Google and they call you up, from your end, what's your goal with that conversation? What things are you asking them? What should they be expecting? And how should that first call go to hopefully give them the strong feeling that they're with the right professional?
Yeah. And every person's a little different. I know sometimes there's busier offices who, hey, I'm not going to talk to you until you fill out an application. That's just not me personally. I mean, so like, you have to decide for yourself if you're okay with that. For me, a first call is about getting to know the client, asking them the questions about where do they want to buy, where are they coming from, where are they PCSing from, just getting to know them, what their goals are. And then I talk a little bit about the process. Okay, if you're going to get pre-approved with me, these are the steps. And let me send you an email with those steps in it. And then when you let me know if you're ready to fill out the application, we'll have a second call and we'll move forward with that, or you can fill it out online. But it's really about them. That's what the first call should be about.
Because really, it's, we say prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. If someone calls and I just start talking, hey, here's our rate, hey, I need you to do this, we don't know anything about that person. Yep. For me personally, I always like to lead it off with, what questions do you have for me? I'm going to ask some questions because we need to know a few things, but I don't want it to feel like an interrogation. So what questions do you have? Fire away. Let's go through all of your questions. And once we get a basis, hopefully by that point, the borrower has a comfort level that I know what I'm talking about, can answer their questions, and I'm listening and hearing them. Then we can start going into some of the things that we need. I'm with you. there's no right or wrong answer. I have some friends that are really good loan officers, and they won't talk to someone that hasn't completed a loan application. From my perspective, a lot of personal information on there. I'm not telling you all that information till we've had a conversation and we make sure that we're on the same page and have some rapport. It's not that I don't trust the person. It's like, I don't want to share that with everyone. I want to make sure we have a rapport level there. So Jason, from your perspective as a realtor, what does that initial conversation look like? Is it similar to the loan side? Obviously, you're asking different questions. You want to know bed and bath count, location, size, school districts, that type of stuff. But what does your first conversation with the borrower look like?
It's actually very similar to Stephanie. I mean, very first question is kind of like, how can I help you? What questions do you have? And then kind of leading into, once it's like, hey, I'm looking to purchase in Southern California. And then it's like, okay, well, let's talk timelines. When do you plan to be here? What does that look like? Are you already here and your PCS scene here? Or, what is your situation? I want to know kind of who you are. I want to find out what you're looking for, but I'm not doing like a buyer's consultation at this point. This is more just getting to know who they are. We're not talking like necessarily, they might mention that, hey, I'm looking for like a 2-bedroom, but I'm not at that point that I'm like, hey, I want to know like your hopes, dreams, and everything you want in a house at this point. This is more just we're exploring, who we are of each other really, and trying to get an idea of, do they have a lender? Have they talked? Are they pre-qualified? Are they working with someone? I also like to find out how they find me. Did they find me through Vetted VA, or did they find me off of I don't know, a card laying in the ground or whatever. I always want to know where they found me, what their expectations are of me. That's a big question too. I always like to ask, what are their expectations from me, and how do they communicate best? That's another big one I'd love to ask, because everyone has kind of, different generations have different ways they like to communicate. Some people are really big on texting. Some people really like that traditional phone call, email. I mean, I have clients that have, literally only used Telegram or WhatsApp or Facebook for the entire transaction. So just kind of get an idea of who they are, what they're looking for. And then at that point, it's kind of following up like, all right, have you gotten pre-approved? If you haven't gotten pre-approved, let's work on that. Here are some lenders, or maybe you're already working with someone. If they are already working with someone, I want to get their contact information to also understand, a little bit about their financial situation, and then scheduling that actual buyer's consultation, which I try to do either in person or like over Zoom or something like that, kind of more of a face-to-face. That way we can kind of read body languages and understand a little bit more what's going on in their situation. But that first call is really just kind of exploring what they need and what they're looking for, and getting to know each other.
That's, you bring up something that's very interesting. 3 years ago, prior to the pandemic, Zoom was out there. Companies were using it. Some people used it, but it wasn't a widely used product. Now, post COVID, everyone has used it and has done it. How much are you guys utilizing that in your businesses? Michael, Stephanie, Jason, just how much is still phone based? I would say I'm still primarily phone based, but I always give clients the option, because on the loan side, no one wants a loan. They need a loan to make that home purchase. So for the most part, we're trying to streamline it, facilitate it, make it as easy as possible for the borrower. Sometimes they do want to do a Zoom call or a Google Meet. Sometimes people just don't like that. They want to have a phone call. So I'd say for me, it's probably 90% phone calls and 10% a Zoom or Meet. But I love it because you can tell so much more about someone when you see their facial expressions and get to know them, versus looking on their driver's license when it comes in and go, oh, that's what that person looks like. So how about for you, Michael? How often are you actually talking to people face to face, either through Zoom or in the office or phone?
I would say over the past year, it's transitioned. I've actually gone mostly Zoom with clients, both on certainly every real estate client is in a Zoom situation, just because there's so much on the line. I think from a realtor standpoint, that you got to find out, are they understanding you? Are you understanding them? Are you reading them right? Because I mean, there's just so many pieces of the puzzle on the real estate side. And I actually started doing this with all of my clients that are doing loans as well, because I found it's just a huge value to understand. You see what's going on in their life. I had a couple that was on Zoom the other day, and there's kids running around in the back. I'm able to talk about kids. I have 12 kids. Obviously, I can relate and understand everything about how their world may be crazy, and I can talk about that. It's another way to build rapport with people. So I think building rapport is probably, I think Jason said this best. If you can build rapport with people, then you're going to be much better off. And certainly a client in a veteran situation wants to feel comfortable with who they're working with.
Stephanie, how about for you? Being in the islands, I'm sure that a lot of people aren't even there, either PCSing in or going to be moving to the islands, job transfer, whatever it is. Is that where you find yourself using Zoom, or you stick mainly to phone? We got you on mute, Stephanie.
Sorry. I'd say about half of my clients, we're doing Zoom at some point. We also, a lot of my clients are obviously PCSing here. I do try to check in with them if they've just PCSed here. They're usually in hotels here in Hawaii for quite, some 2 weeks to 2 months. So I do try to check in with them face to face if I can, now that the pandemic's a little bit over, or hopefully over. But yes, I do like to see them face to face if we can, and if they want to sometime during the transaction. I think it really does help, like what Michael was saying, just to solidify the relationship. I often will save it if we haven't met face to face on Zoom in the very beginning. I like to go over the loan estimate together on Zoom. That's one thing I do, especially for first-time home buyers.
The numbers are really a big area. I mean, on the real estate side, I know it's important, but a lot of times, especially when you're trying to show someone debt to income ratios, like a lot of times I'll say, can we please just jump on the Zoom, and I can pull up our loan origination software and say, okay, I'm saying we need to pay off this and this, and here's why. You see how that number is too high. Now we pay those and we're good, and you guys have that money. I find that people see it a lot easier when you can share it through video. So there's not a right or a wrong answer. If you're not comfortable on video, don't feel like you need to do that. But hopefully your professionals on both the real estate and the mortgage side are able to at least offer that to you. I know for me, the difference is, especially if we have a couple, and so we're trying to coordinate 2 people and my schedule, it's hard to get them into the office. A lot of times we'll have wife is still at work, husband is at home or on a business trip, and I'm here at the office, and trying to coordinate 3 schedules is really difficult. So it is a very good tool for facilitating and getting everyone together. Now, one of the things that came up earlier, Jason, you were saying, I would like to know where people found me. Did you find me online from Google reviews, Facebook reviews, Yelp, whatever it may be? What do you guys find is important about that? How does that review process and people finding you that way help your business? What do you see maybe from some online reviews that are a little bit less than direct or clear about what someone can expect from that process? Any advice you have for our vetted VA members in terms of how to best utilize online reviews when they're making a decision in selecting their professionals?
I guess I'll go first. In some ways, reviews are great, right? You can go through. I mean, everybody looks at review. Someone tells you to go eat at Surf and Salsa down the street. Okay, I'm gonna go look online and see how people like it. However, I will say, I think in our industry, when you see people with lots of reviews, in order to get someone to fill out a review, you have to ask them for it in this industry, for the most part. Some people will do it spontaneously, but not everybody will. Most of the reviews you see on there, they have been asked for. So I would say the amount of reviews someone has is as many transactions they have that they've asked people to put the reviews on. But you just have to look carefully. I mean, there's, a lot of times people will focus on the bad review and like, oh, that one person said this and this and this. And I think the important thing is, how does the professional respond to the unfavorable review? Are they like, well, you weren't my client and I didn't like you anyway? Or are they like, we're sorry that you felt this way, let's touch base. That's a more professional way to handle it. So if I saw someone doing the first thing, I'd be like, no, I wouldn't want to work with that person just by the way that they respond to a negative review. That's what I look for, actually.
You know, you said something important. Having a ton of reviews doesn't guarantee that that's someone you want to work with or a great professional. What I will say is if someone doesn't have any reviews or a handful of reviews, it makes it really hard to make a judgment. Also, when you dig down into those reviews and see what the people are saying, you know, Zillow will say that it actually is better to find a 4.9 rated star, or at least consumers will put more weight on that, because when they see a pure 5.0, they're like, no one is perfect. You're telling me you never dropped the ball anywhere? And then, like you said, how the professional responds to it. And probably more importantly, let's say someone has 1,000 reviews and there's 10 2-star reviews in there. Did they all say the same thing? It may then tell you that that person, they're not good at returning phone calls or emails. And you go, well, that's important to me. I like open communication, whatever it may be. Or if all 10 of those people say, hey, my numbers up front were this, and then later on was this, versus 10 different problems that different people had. And that's an extreme example because most people don't have even 100 reviews. So you're likely to only find 2, 3, 4 bad reviews. For me, when I'm looking and when I make a comparison, is how detailed are those reviews? Like you said, you have to ask someone. And if they're doing it out of a sense of obligation, they're going to say 5-star, Jason was good, versus someone that goes 5-star and tells you 10 ways that Jason went above and beyond to help them in that process. Really gives you a feel for the person and how many of those people are doing that. You know, to me, it kind of drives me crazy. You're 100% correct. If we don't ask, maybe 1 out of 25 people will just voluntarily go out and leave a review. When you ask them, they're happy, they're thrilled. Hey, I would love to leave a review for you. The one that's frustrating is the person that had the really difficult loan and you've been over backwards and did everything for, and they leave you the Jason was nice. And then the person that was the easiest borrower in the history of the world that anyone could have done their loan goes above and beyond. Jason did amazing things. No one else in the world could have done this. So it's interesting from our perspective. If you get to the end of a transaction, if someone went above and beyond for you and did a great job, it is very helpful from our end to have those reviews out there. But Jason, Michael, do you have any other thoughts on things that someone should be looking for in online reviews?
I would go back to kind of what you said, the stories. I always look like, you know, kind of for anything really, when I'm researching, you know, I don't know, a fence company or a contractor or whatever, you know, kind of looking through the reviews and kind of weeding through the ones that, you know, maybe are bad reviews just to see what went wrong, you know, and try to figure out if there is some sort of underlying story or if it was just a one-off. I like to look at the dates when the reviews were done, or were they all recently done, or have they been, you know, spanned a couple years? Kind of tells you how long they've been in business, how long they have been receiving those reviews. Were the bad reviews when they first started, or were they just last month? Maybe, you know, maybe there's a family issue. We're all human, so sometimes we may not be on our, you know, A game. So, you know, it kind of using some of that ability to do a little bit of research. I really like to see the stories, you know, and then from the consumer side, when you do have someone that you're working with and they did an amazing job, or you overcome some sort of difficulty, you know, leaving that as part of your review really helps, I think, everyone. I mean, you know, when they're researching for someone else too, way better than just saying, hey, they were great.
Yeah, and a lot of things, there are these, you guys, there's services now that will do this for you. Your CRM just sends out the link, and it's almost like from my end, you can tell that, not just with mortgage and real estate people, but in other industries, when it's just little one sentence or 80% of the reviews are just a star rating, you know, you can tell that it was something that was prompting them to leave that response versus feeling like, hey, I had a deep and strong interaction with this business. And what I can say for us, you know, if someone spends 30 days doing a real estate transaction with Michael, you know him pretty well at the end of the process. So we do tend to get better reviews than other industries because we have a lot of long and deep interactions. People spend time with you in the car, at the house, writing an offer, going back and forth in negotiations, closing the loan for them. We do tend to get better reviews. So I would put some weight to that. And it's fine if someone has 8 or 10 reviews. Hopefully they have some good ones in there with some good stories that give you some insight and feel into them. You know, Jason, you had said something earlier that I think is important, that hopefully the professional in that initial call is asking you the right questions. How do you like to be communicated with? What's important to you in the transaction? But some people don't do that. I would say, as a consumer, as a buyer, borrower, seller, don't hesitate to tell your service providers what's important to you. We all value different things, and there's 100 different measures in a real estate transaction or a mortgage transaction that may or may not be important to you. So if being available at midnight on a Sunday is not important to you, don't say that's important, or don't mention it. But if it is important to you and it's critically important, let the realtor or the loan officer know that that's important to you, because they may say, hey, Sundays, I am not available at all. I am with my family, and you're just never going to hear back from me. Neither one person is right or wrong in that, but it sort of gives you insight and perspective into whether you're a good fit and a good match for them. With that, Michael, when you have someone that's looking to find a realtor or a mortgage professional, are there any red flags or things that would jump out that if a professional so it shows those red flags, that a consumer should be aware, or at least ask some questions and dig around?
Red flags. Wow. There's probably a ton of red flags, but let me think. I would say, if they're asking questions, if a potential client is asking professional questions, they need to be asking not only what's important to them, but the things that are going to help them make an educated decision. And are the realtors and the loan officers educated in what you're asking? So if you're asking about a specific area, are they familiar with that area? If you're asking a specific loan question or loan type, are they familiar with that loan type? We have a lot of questions that come through Vetted VA on construction loans, one-time construction loans, the OTC loan. If a person's not familiar with that, if a realtor's not familiar with that, it's going to be a nightmare. So you need to make sure, as a potential future buyer, that you definitely know who you're working with. A red flag would be, oh yeah, I did one of those one time, and we could do it for you. I mean, that may not be the best choice,
We'll take care of you. We got you.
Oh yeah.
I would say those are red flag comments.
Yeah, for sure. So
I'll jump in. I mean, I kind of go with Michael. Like, when you have as a consumer and you're looking to purchase in Hawaii or, wherever, if you're asking, your real estate agent, what are the home prices going for? How fast are they going for? Kind of just like that local macroeconomics, do they know how many homes are on the market right now? Like today, do they know? Because most agents, if they're working on a day-to-day basis, will know that data. They know how fast homes are sitting on the market. They know the price point. They know what your BAH is based off of your rank. They know all this data because they're doing it every day. So if they're stuttering around kind of that market data, and I would probably go the same with, as a lender, if the lender doesn't know what the interest rates are, or what, at least give you an average of where you might be looking. And that same kind of goes where Michael, I think, mentioned it kind of at the very beginning, going with the, if we're working with a VA loan, when was the last time you did a VA loan? What have been your successes? What have been your failures? I want to know about your failures and how did those turn out? And that also goes from the real estate agent standpoint. Have you had any tidewaters? If you ask what a tidewater is and the real estate agent doesn't know what it is, or for that matter, your lender or mortgage professional, then that might be a red flag. Using some of the terms in Vetted VA that we have education on, and you pronounce those terms to whoever you're trying to work with, and they're kind of looking at you with questions in their eyes, that might be a red flag.
Absolutely. So that you bring up a really good point, and I would like, you guys to we'll go around the horn and ask you, why is it important with a VA borrower who's using their VA financing, why is it important that they deal with a realtor or a mortgage professional who has experience with the program? There's 50 different answers here, and they're all good and valid. But from your perspective, Jason, you were just talking about it, but from your perspective, why is that important that the realtor actually have experience with the program? And I'll preface that by saying, VA is a small subset of all the loans out there. So there are very good loan officers who never or rarely touch a VA loan, very good realtors who rarely or never come across a VA borrower. And we all here feel pretty strongly that it is very important that if you're a veteran using your VA financing, you need to have someone with experience. But Jason, from your perspective, why is that?
I mean, right off the bat, like, I think probably, I don't know, just throwing a number out there, let's say 95% of all agents probably can successfully close a VA buyer, right? But the ones that don't, it's when those issues come about. Like, let's say you get a Tidewater, but then that Tidewater failed and it ran into an ROV, and you submitted your ROV and you're like, hey, I submitted my ROV and it didn't come back in 10 days. Well, knowing that if you're educated and you've done ROVs, you would know that, hey, just your VA staff appraisers don't accept the ROV on day one. There can be a grace period. Like when the market was really busy, it could be a 5-day period. And knowing that, hey, then there's an additional 10 days. Well, knowing this in advance, knowing what the market's doing and how competitive it was, a year ago, knowing that, hey, as a real estate agent, I don't want to pressure a short close, knowing that I may end up especially if I'm going high on a property and we're going, hey, like my buyer wants to offer, I don't know, let's say 50,000 over, and we're contingent on an appraisal. And I know all this, I'm not going to shorten my timeline down to like 8 days, knowing that I may end up in a Tidewater, and then that may lead into an ROV, because now I'm going to be begging the seller to give me extra days off the bat. Like, so that forethought, knowing how many days it takes to do a Tidewater, how many days it takes to do an ROV, and that there's a grace period between when the staff appraiser actually accepts that's where that experience comes in with, and that goes even for the lender side.
And we could probably just do the whole episode here about this. You just gave one example around Tidewater and why, in your mind, if I'm writing an aggressive over ask offer, why I might need to account for that. And that's one little thing just with the appraisal. What I will tell everyone, and we cover this a lot on the show, the VA loan is probably the most flexible loan program there is, but it's not if you don't know all those flexibilities, if you don't know all the nuances and the details and the ways to use them in your favor. What I'll say is, and you guys would probably agree, 90% of transactions, just about any loan officer, any realtor could successfully handle. The problem is, on the way in, you don't know what's going to be the 10% that has the unique or the strange thing. You may say, I'm gold plated. I make $200,000 a year. I've been on my job forever. I've got $1 million in the bank and I have an 800 credit score. That doesn't insulate you from a Tidewater issue on an appraisal. You don't know the things that may come up in a transaction that not having a lender or a realtor understanding would impact or dictate whether you have a successful and a happy transaction with an on-time closing the way you expected it. Stephanie, from the loan side, are there some additional things that maybe we haven't covered that make it really important that you're working with a loan officer who has experience with the program?
Yeah, I'll admit, right now I am a broker, right? So, but I've worked for retail lender before, and when I worked for my retail lender before, they were VA specific retail lender, and we would just deflect to our manager when we had a question. I will admit, when I worked there for 2.5 years, I never read the VA handbook. So being in this group, realizing that you can have done VA loans and still never have read the VA handbook, and really be prepared for what Jason was talking about. When something comes up, you're able to immediately recognize it, immediately be able to handle it, and immediately be able to know what your next steps are. And then to be able to talk, as the lender, to the real estate agent and the borrowers, hey, these are our next steps. We're all good. these are our next things we're gonna do. These are the possible results. Now, I'll admit, when I was a newer loan officer and I worked at this other place, I would just ask the manager for the answers. But that wasn't necessarily helping me, with my professional development, me understanding how all of this works. And that's one of the things that, I really personally love being a part of Vetted VA is our professionals that are in this group really have gone above and beyond to understand the VA loan in a way that I don't see, some other people doing. But like I said, I think it's asking the questions of your lender, your real estate agent. Do they truly understand? Tell me about your last time you did had a Tidewater. Tell me about the last time you had an ROV. Tell me about the last time you had a contract with a multifamily property or a property with, we call Ohana unit, which is an ADU. Those are the things that if you don't see over and over and over again, you give a pre-approval letter for a property like that, and it comes back to bite you. So I think it's just being able to ask sometimes you might not know if a real estate agent or a lender has that experience. But like I love Jason's idea of using the terminology that you learn in Vetted VA, as our members, and just kind of throwing it back out. Right now, like for example, assumptions is a big topic. I know we had our other live on that, but I've had recently some VA borrowers talk to real estate agents who have no clue what assumptions are. And that's kind of a really important thing to understand right now with your VA buyers.
I think the same thing. I don't want someone coming at us with like gotcha questions of looking up some crazy arcane guideline in the VA handbook. But the things that we talk about here that you see in the forums regularly, that you see on some of the lives, definitely throw something out there. Just ask them if they've had experience. Ask them just in the last year, how many veterans have you helped with VA financing? Because it is important. 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be, but you never know when you're going to be the one that really needs an expert in your corner. Let's look at this. We actually have a question here from a viewer, and it's really just more soliciting opinions here. Seeking advice from this group. Here's my dilemma. I'm a retired veteran, currently has my first VA home loan on my current home. Backstory, I'm not entirely pleased with my current mortgage lender. Not big issues, but looking for your reviews. I was notified I'm being transferred. I currently reside in Mississippi, will be transferring to Southern Central Illinois in the next 3 to 4 months. Asking for your opinions. So I think the question here is, getting transferred to another area, don't necessarily love the lender that I'm with. And I don't think any of us would really recommend calling up your current servicer and getting your pre-approval with them. But in terms of that, someone moving out of the area, maybe, when you're moving from states, a lot of us are not approved in all 50 states. You may have to start over and find a new lender. So what would your advice be to someone moving out of your area and looking for both a realtor and mortgage professionals in a new area? Michael, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, one of the things that it helps here in Vetted VA is part of everything that we do here is educate you. The education process starts not just in the forum, but also at vettedva.com, because vettedva.com has a boatload of information. And on that page is also a map which shows professionals just about everywhere across the country. And those professionals have been vetted. That is one way that you could certainly look for somebody that's, say, a real estate agent or a loan officer. And people get caught up sometimes on, well, there's not one in my city where I'm going or what I'm doing. And my suggestion there is, find a professional close by and then give them a call and say, hey, here's what I'm looking to do. And start asking the questions. They'll get you referred to the right people, the right place. And that's what we're here for. We're here to educate you. We're here to help you find a way to get a home loan and get into a home. And the best way to do that is to make sure you're educated. And then one thing on education that y'all were just talking about, and Jason, I'm sure Jason does this. When you're putting in an offer for a house and you have a VA loan going against other types of loans, it is super important to have an expert, somebody that is educated in the process and understands. And also, every single one of my transactions that I'm the loan officer, if I'm a loan officer, I'm calling the listing agent too, right behind or right ahead of. I've even done it. Hey, you're going to get an offer here in the next 15, 30 minutes from this person. They're turning in an offer. When they turn this offer in, I just want to let you know this is what they're getting. They have a VA loan, but not only do they have a VA loan, they're fully approved. This is, and I just go down the list of all the reasons that it's a good loan product. This is why it's a good loan product, and try to educate that listing agent, because so many times, like y'all have said, there are agents that just don't even know, and they don't know what to do with it, and they just kind of slough it off or turn the other way. So that's super important too. Education is huge.
Sometimes just having that conversation and the listing agent hearing that there's someone involved in the transaction that really knows the program is going to give them a comfort level that they wouldn't otherwise have. And they may still not understand, or they may still have negative preconceived ideas about the VA loan program, but hearing that someone is confident and has done the legwork up front. So 1,000% for us on the loan side, it's essential. It's critical. You know, Jason, a minute ago, you talked about Tidewater. Just to point out, if you guys are watching, you're like, you don't know what Tidewater is. A few months back, we did a full live here. 4 experts went through and gave you everything you need to know about VA appraisals and what Tidewater is and all of the flexibilities that you have with VA loans. We also did an episode last year of how your professionals can help you get your offer accepted. There's a lot of negative misperceptions about the VA loan program. So having a realtor that understands it can explain it to the listing agent. Having a lender who understands it can reach out and explain it to the listing agent, and the sellers, if necessary, go a long ways. So if you want to go back and check those out, we definitely have that content there. We have another good question here. Valerie Jenkins says, I would like to know, when do we start the process of getting approved? No lender, I'm in the process of building credit. So we're sitting here talking about, how do you find the right person? What do you guys think in terms of when do they get pre-approved? Stephanie, what's your advice when you have someone that's pretty early in the process? When should they start thinking about getting pre-approved?
So I'd say if someone is active duty and they received orders, that would not be too early to reach out to a loan officer and just have that initial conversation, maybe talk to a few at that point. Because there's some things that we can do early in the process. You know, a lot of our clients, if we're loan officers, sometimes we're working with them for 2 years. And sometimes, you know, maybe there's something in their credit they need to fix. Maybe they need to save a little more. Maybe they need to sell another home. And, you know, there's a lot we can do to help them be absolutely ready to go when they're ready to go. You know, so yeah, if you're PCSing, as soon as you get orders, be in touch. I would say if, you know, even a year ahead of time, 2 years ahead of time, you know, is not too early. Right now, I'm even telling my clients who I know bought 3 years ago, they're ready to PCS. I've sent them emails saying, some of them, not all of them, but some of them, like, hey, now if you're going to be PCSing and you're going to sell, now is the time to talk to a real estate agent. Not 3 days before you're PCSing out, which does happen sometimes. But in this market, they need to now talk to people way ahead of time. So
let me ask you guys this. Is it ever too early to start the pre-approval process? And I don't necessarily mean pulling credit, but interviewing either a realtor or a mortgage professional and starting that pre-approval process of getting your ducks in a row.
I don't think so. I'll jump in. Kind of like what Stephanie said. I mean, well, even going back to Valerie's question, you know, if you think you have to work on credit, or you think that maybe you have some holes in your financial ability to get pre-approved, I would say reach out to, you know, a mortgage professional lender as soon as possible, because they have the ability to kind of encompassing look at your financial history, look at what's going on. You know, they can do rapid rescores. And in some cases, I feel like in a lot of cases, people underestimate their ability to purchase. They think, oh, you know, my credit's horrible. That's going to take me, you know, a half a decade before I can get to buy a house. And then they talk to, you know, a lender, mortgage professional, whoever, And it's like, actually, we just have to pay down these two credit cards, and in about 7 months you'll be good. And in some cases, it can even be in like a month or two. And people were like mind blowing that, hey, I can actually buy a home way sooner than I thought. And then going back to what you had just mentioned, Josh, I think researching your lender, your real estate agent, I mean, at any time is good. We've worked with clients that, 2.5 years before they actually finally got to the round to actually, purchasing. Just conversations. Sometimes it's just the education. They wanted a little bit of education up front, and they had built a nice rapport, and finally they decided to purchase, or they didn't purchase here in San Diego, but go, hey, Jason, you know what? I know we never purchased, but I'm finally getting orders to Hawaii, or I'm getting orders to, to the East Coast. Do you know anyone that could help us like you did and actually buy? And it's like, oh yeah. So I think at any time is a good time to have a conversation.
I think one of the things that makes people hesitate is they feel one of two things. They're worried that they're going to get sold, that the realtor or the mortgage professional wants to sell them and close them today, and they're going to be sold on doing something sooner rather than later. And unfortunately, I do hear that, hey, I reached out to the realtor and I told them I want to buy in June. I was just getting my ducks in a row, and they're pushing me to write offers now or to go look at properties, and vice versa. Lenders doing the same thing. But it's not common. I ask the question here every week or every other week is do you guys mind getting questions at any point in time early in the process? And everyone's answer is a version of this. Absolutely not. I'm going to be doing loans a year from now, 5 years from now, selling houses 10 years from now. My job is to build relationships with people who know, like, and trust me to have the answers that they need. So from my perspective, and everyone that I've talked to here on the show, no one is against answering your calls, and no one feels like you're wasting their time. If we spend an hour on the phone and I give you all the knowledge and information you need to prep yourself over the next 6 or 12 months or 2 years or 5 years to be in a position to buy, that's really what my job is. The actual nuts and bolts, I don't know how you guys feel, but the nuts and bolts of putting transactions together is a pretty small portion of our job. The rest of it is talking to people, building relationships, solving problems, that type of stuff. So we actually have a couple of additional questions here, and it may be one big question with a follow-up here. And I know these big questions cover you guys up on the bottom row, so I'm going to throw it up and then probably take it back down. How often as a realtor do you avoid showing a home a potential buyer would like to see? In my situation, there were 2 homes well below my pre-approval amount that I wanted to see. And each time my realtor gave many tasks or simply navigated away from the discussion. How much should the buyer's agent negotiate for the buyer? So we have 2 questions here. As a realtor, do you avoid showing a potential home a buyer would like to see? How much should the buyer's agent negotiate for the buyer? And sort of the follow-up here, I think it is the same question. How much should the real estate agent be involved in the offer? Is it normal to push a buyer to put in an offer? Is it normal for a realtor to push you to make an offer when you have concerns about the amount of your mortgage or additional costs of moving into a home? So Michael, Jason, you guys work on the real estate side of the equation. There's definitely, we talked about red flags earlier, a couple things here. There are a little bit of red flags for me, but why don't you guys to react to the questions there and just the general tone of what it seems like they're going through?
I would say if somebody's trying to push you into something and it's stretching you too much, that's definitely a red flag. You should feel comfortable. One, you should feel comfortable working with them and trust them. But if they're trying to push, oh, you got to write an offer, this is the way you got to do it, this is the way it's done, that's a red flag. I think you need to slow down, take a step back a little bit, kind of reevaluate the situation. As far as the other part of that question, I would say, like a real estate agent, as a real estate agent, if somebody wants to see a house, I show them. And it doesn't matter whether I like the house or not. I'm going to point out some obvious things about houses. I'm not one of those, I guess, salesy people that says, oh, this is a wonderful house. I mean, I'm going to tell you the truth. This is the good and the bad and the ugly about this house. And you need to understand that, because you're going to buy it, and eventually you're going to come back and look at me and either give me a bad review or yell at me because I walked you into something you didn't want to get into. So I'd rather not do that and just say, hey, here's the gut level honest truth. I don't like this house because of these things, or you know what, I really do like this house. This fits all the requirements. On the real estate side, I kind of do things a little different. Well, I feel like I do things different. We ask all these questions, the buyer's consultation, you do all that stuff up front. And the reason you do that is because it helps you narrow down what they really, really, really want. And if you can do that, it's really not a hard process to find a house because you've narrowed it down so much that we've just pinpointed exactly what you're looking for. Not just 3-bedroom, 2-bath, but we know a whole lot of information just based on what everything you're wanting. We've looked at 1, we've looked at 2, and we can kind of shift and know we're navigating away from a certain type of house. I mean, I don't think we avoid them. I think it's just, I have done this before. I've called out a buyer. I was like, you said you wanted this type of house, but you want me to show you this type of house. That's not what you said. You didn't want this kind of house. And they backed off, but they backed off because, oh yeah, you're right. I did tell you that. So I just try to help keep them focused, obviously, on what they're looking for.
Jason, did you have some thoughts?
I kind of agree with Michael. I mean, it's really, I'll show someone, whatever they want to see, but after the buyer's consultation, normally we have a pretty stringent list of what they're looking for. So if they, I don't know, are browsing Zillow, kind of outside their search and just pick like some random house, and I go and look it up and I'm like, oh, like this isn't really, especially since we work with a lot of veterans, and a lot of veterans I don't know why my lights just went off. Yeah. Most veterans tend to be or at least want to be very direct. So, in that case, I'm just gonna be like, hey, we talked on this date and these were the kind of things you were looking for, and this house doesn't necessarily have them. Are you sure you want to go see it? If they're like, yeah, I want to, okay, then let's go see it. I just want to make sure though that you realize that, hey, what you initially had said is different than this house, and we can change those parameters. I just want to make sure that I'm looking for the best thing that, whatever the criteria that you've given me, I'm trying to find it for you. So if the criteria has changed, I need to update my criteria, or maybe this is just a one-off because it's interesting, and that's fine too. The second part of that question, I don't actually remember what it was.
Just about pushing you to write an offer on a property that you.
I'm not going to push. I mean, I might even push them not to write an offer. Honestly, that more likely be the case, because I don't want anyone to be in a financial position that they're just not comfortable with. Kind of like Michael said, I don't want someone coming back when they're like, hey, I can't make the payments and it's your fault. No, I mean, a lot of buyers tend to think about that big number, like, oh, I'm approved at, $500,000 or $1 million. And it's like, whoa, that's great. But that doesn't even matter. Like, we don't care about that big number. I want to know, what is that number that you feel comfortable on a month-to-month basis? Because that's what you have to live with. That's what, at end of each month, you have to make that payment. No one cares about $500,000, $1 million, that doesn't matter. It's that monthly amount. And that's where I want you to be comfortable at, because that's where you can still afford your groceries. You can still take your family out, to activities. I don't want you to be house poor. So.
Right. For sure.
Hey, Josh, one of the things that we see a lot in vetted VA, when we're moderating, and of course we have to approve posts or decline posts, but we do see the question a lot or something along these lines, a question like the one you just brought up, Josh. And then people are like, well, can I fire my real estate agent? That's a question we get asked a lot. It's like our answer is always like, well, take a step back, figure out what were the red flags. Why do you, and sometimes it, they'll even message us, and it does sound like a real good reason to move on. But I just wanted to ask Jason and Michael, that is a question we get a lot. Can you fire your real estate agent? Or, what would be the reason to step away from a real estate agent in a situation like the question that we just had?
I can't speak on all states, because every state has different contracts, buyer's representation contracts. So it kind of depends on if that buyer signed a buyer's representation contract, and then what is worded in that contract as far as how to terminate that relationship. I can say though, if you're angry with your real estate agent, then it's time to have a conversation. Like, I feel that and this also goes for if you're upset with your mortgage professional, your lender. If you're feeling feelings that like they're not answering my questions, or they're not communicating enough with me, or whatever that internal discussion that you're having at home with yourself, on a Sunday night, or with your spouse, it's probably time to pick up the phone, or or email, text, whatever, and have a conversation. Like, everyone's human, and to give them at least a little bit of benefit of the doubt, have a conversation. Maybe they don't recognize that you're feeling that way, and voice your issues, and let them at least address it before you jump to try to restart the situation. Especially if you're already in an escrow and you're already under contract. Changing real estate agents is not going to be an easy task for probably any state. And depending on how far along you are in, under contract, changing lenders in that can severely delay, can cost more money. And in some cases, a seller may decide that they're not going to extend that contract, and you may lose out in that home. So it's always better to try to resolve the situation than just to kind of like jump out the window and at least that's my initial go-to for a lot of these issues is let's have a conversation first.
And tying that back into the conversation that we're having tonight, how do you find pros that you connect with, that have your best interests at heart, that are going to get you to the finish line successfully? A lot of times when I hear that, hey, we're not happy with the realtor. Hey, we've been working with this guy or girl for 3 months and we've seen properties. It's not fun looking with them. They keep pushing us to make an offer, telling us that house is no good. We don't want to make an offer, questioning whether we're qualified, pushing us to a higher price. A lot of times it's someone that went the easy route. Hey, my brother-in-law just got his license. Hey, a girl at work has her license. It's that they went with the first person that they talked to, rather than having a deliberate process for finding someone that they connect with, that they feel hears them, understands them, listens to them, and has the knowledge and expertise to deliver on that. Guys, we're at about 57 minutes. We try to keep these at around an hour. We were going to discuss a little bit about moderation tonight, but the more I think about it, I think we probably do a whole episode on that of talking to people here, members of Vetted VA, of how to best use the forums and what goes into all that. But with that, I did want to get one sort of last question in, that we get an area of questions that come from borrowers, buyers all the time. And that is, do my realtor and lender have to work together? My realtor said I should talk to their lender, or I got pre-approved and they wanted me to talk to a realtor that they work with. Are there benefits to that? Are there downsides to it? And does someone have to do it? Michael, you're in a unique position. You work both sides of the fence. How would you answer a question of someone asking that?
I don't think anybody has to work with that specific reference if they're making a reference, but I think it's always important to know that in a realtor situation, a realtor has worked with a lender in the past. If they have a good rapport with that lender, that could be super beneficial. I still think you have to fall back on, if you're looking at a vetted VA realtor, then you need to make sure you're also looking at, okay, is this person the lender? Is that person vetted? Have they gone through a vetted process, or do they know enough about, here we're back to another interview with that lender? Do they meet the qualifications that you have for? Do they do veteran loans? Do they do a lot of veteran loans? Is their primary business veteran loans? And the same is true vice versa. I mean, it's a little bit different. Lenders don't push realtors as much because a lot of realtors have their own relationships, but there are occasions where lenders have realtors that they tend to work with, and they'll recommend them. I still think making sure that the person understands you, connects with you. People, was it Ryan Serhant said, people love shopping with friends. You got to make sure that you get along, that you shop well, that you can laugh and have a good time. It's not all serious all the time. So you got to be able to have that rapport with people. That's important.
Absolutely. Jason, there's a subset of buyers, borrowers that always have that thought that there's some negative connotation. Why are they pushing me to this person? Are they getting a kickback? What's important to you when someone comes to you and they have not been pre-approved and you're recommending they get pre-approved with a lender or a couple of lenders? Why do you do that, and what's important about that process?
It kind of goes back with building that rapport with when you're first meeting with that client, you're trying to build a rapport. When a real estate agent is, at least in my experience, is referring, a lender, it's because they have a rapport. They have a friendship. They've done, several lines of business with them where that, hey, this lender is going to communicate properly. Is I know that I can get a hold of, the lender when you're part of that 10% and it's going wrong, right? Like that's so huge in a transaction, is to be able to get a hold of, having someone that can communicate to the real estate agent. Because a lot of times, when stuff starts going wrong on lenders that are undesirable, they stop answering the phone. And then you have a listing agent that's saying, hey, what's going on? We're going to cancel. We're going to, we're going to send you a notice to perform. And you're the middleman going, I don't know what's going on, and I can't get a hold of your lender. Can you please call your lender? Where if you've already had that rapport, we have their personal cell phones and we know their addresses, like come knock on your door type deal. So there is a big benefit in that. Is it required? By no means. We can build a rapport with someone, and I'm always open to, working with new people. You never know who might be a better lender, especially for certain niches. I find that lenders tend to have certain niches where they're really good at certain things. You might have lenders that are, can do very low credit scores. Those are good people to know. And vice versa. You have ones that are very fast, or, might know, like Michael had said earlier, where there's, a small amount of lenders that were really good with like the one-time close. You don't just go like, hey, if you have a buyer that's wanting to do a one-time close, you're not just going to be like calling up Joe Schmo. Not everyone knows that. So I think there's good and bad. I mean, it's not to say that you can't have a new lender work with a new real estate agent. They're going to develop a relationship. The key is they actually develop the relationship and that there's communication. I say this all the time in vetted VA. The first thing that'll destroy a transaction is communication, and the number one thing that leads to success in a transaction is communication. So if there's communication, if people are answering their phones, picking up, regardless if it's good information or bad information, at least we're getting information processed so that we can pass it to the listing agent and or the seller, and everyone's like okay with that. That's always better than to try to hide that information or not pick up the phone. And then, those emotions build and things happen, and then the transaction falls apart.
Our jobs on both sides of this are to make sure we minimize the chances of anything going wrong. That being said, anyone that's done loans or done real estate for an extended period of time knows that there are unforeseen things. There's things that come up. A realtor, contrary to many loan officers' popular belief, can deal with bad news if they know this is the news, this is what's happened, and here's our plan for overcoming it. They cannot and will not deal with you not answering the phone or hiding out for days or telling them we're going to have an answer in 48 hours and then going silent in 48 hours and it's 96 hours and there's no answer. So you're 100% correct, Jason, that communication is the key thing there. So we're over an hour at this point. We've talked a lot about what you should be looking for in these professionals, what you should be asking them when you're interviewing them. And it is important to talk to a couple. You don't have a point of reference. You wouldn't marry the first person you ever went on a date with, or better yet, had a phone conversation with. You're going to go out on some dates. You're going to get to know them and select the person that is the best fit for you. And I think that's kind of what you're trying to do here. So with that said, is there anything that you guys think we haven't covered, or just some final words of wisdom that we should leave the Vetted VA members with here?
Well, I don't know if this is a final word of wisdom, but you had mentioned something about realtors and kickbacks with loan officers and stuff like that. Just to be clear, Vetted VA, all the people, all our moderators, and we sign a lot of documents stating that, we conduct our business ethically, There's a lot of information that we have to go through. There's testing that we have to go through. I know you guys, maybe you're just as tired of testing as I am, because we just went through a whole nother round of testing. We're constantly taking new classes here in Vetted VA, and this is what Chris designed Vetted VA for, is to elevate the standard so that a group of people can take care of educating veterans properly, and then ultimately these veterans have a place that they can turn to answer their questions for their loans, their home buying journey, and anything that they may have coming up. So we don't actually get kickbacks. That's illegal, actually. So
Actually, we had a question today. We've had several questions today of does my realtor, do I have to work with their lender? We've had actually that question twice today. The short answer is no. They're two separate entities that you can hire separately. However, there are people out there that do give bonuses or incentives. Someone had used those words. They're not bonuses and incentives. They're actually illegal kickbacks is what they are, to the lender or realtor or vice versa for that lead or for that closed loan. That is not allowed. If and I think what we're feeling from some borrowers is that they're getting a feeling that from one of those two people that they have to work with that other person. Otherwise, they're going to lose something. And if you have that feeling, I would say that's probably not a good situation to be in.
Absolutely.
Use your gut. Back to what Jason said. Use your gut. This is, this is these are sales positions. There's a lot of sales language that's used from a lot of people. And that's what I think what we're trying to do in Vetted VA is to kind of cut that all out and get straight to the information. And that's what you should expect from any professional that you work with.
True. Jason, how about yourself? Any final thoughts?
I think I had my final thought on the last one, which was just the communication. Just keep the communication open. It seems like, maybe it's a little bit of human nature that, we get scared and we kind of, cocoon ourselves. But, if you're scared, you have questions with your, who you're working with, you need to talk to them. You need to ask questions. If you're afraid to ask questions initially, come here to Vetted VA, ask them. We'll tell you, those are great questions. Go ask your realtor, go ask your, your lender, and get clarification. Just don't be afraid. Like closing down, that's just not, it doesn't help. It doesn't help the situation.
Be your own advocate in this situation is the best way to make sure. Hopefully your realtor is doing that and your lender is doing that, but make sure you're at least doing that for yourself as well, which if you're in this group, you're advocating for yourself. You came here to get educated, get information. So on that note, appreciate the three of you showing up and sharing your knowledge and expertise tonight. For those of you who showed up and watched, for those of you who asked questions, appreciate you being here, and we'll be back next week with a new group of experts and a new topic and a bunch of questions. So if you have a question we didn't get to tonight, come back next week. We'll be here on Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Josh.